Hi, my name is Soraya Almeida. I'm a Brazilian geologist, and I will talk about Richard Burton travels on the Ribeira and Paraíba valleys at the province of São Paulo. But first, I wish to express my special thanks to Mr. Kaiser Pimentel de Araújo for accepting the invitation as a representative of Brazil. Mr. Pimentel de Araújo, nosso muito obrigado pela sua participação. Well, during his time in Brazil, Richard Burton lived in Santos, arriving in November 1865. In the next 3 months, Burton toured the Ribeira and Paraíba valleys, and the description of these trees has not been published in books, but Burton wrote articles in Portuguese about them in a local newspaper. The journey to Ribeira Valley started on December 16, when Burton took a ship from Santos to the village of Cananéia. He went as a member of a commission to survey a beach area colony located 30 kilometers from the village. After inspecting the colony, which Burton advised against them because of his belief that Europeans were not able to live in that climate, the group headed to the interior of the Ribeira Valley, following a trail towards Barra de Pindaúba, where they stayed overnight at the house of Louis Donner van der Hoff, an immigrant who lived there with his family. They arrived in Pindaúba on December 25, Christmas Day. On the next day, they left the village of Batatal, crossing a detestable, Burton words, mountain range where they were under risk of dying, being saved by the discovery of a farm belonging to a Portuguese colonist. From Batatal, it was no longer possible to follow the existing path by land, since the intense rain made it impossible to cut through the high mountains. The group continued the journey by canoe, going up the Ribeira do Iguape River, passing through the waterfalls of Poço Grande, Caracol, and Funil, which ones Burt describes as beautiful. On December 29, they arrived in Iporanga, where Burton intended to visit a little deposit discovered in the early 9th century. Due to the deluge that flooded the entire region, they could only go to the Morro do Chumbo 3 days later. The term deluge is not Burton's exaggeration. Occasionally, this region is subject to strong rains, as occurred recently in January, when Iporanga River rose 7 meters above normal level, and its waters covered the town. The site of the lead deposit was very deep in the wild, and they had to cross virgin forest to reach it. Spend the night there during this weather means death, said Burton. January 2nd, they left Iporanga toward Chiririca, where the village priest showed him a cone-shaped hill of which slopes had been covered by flames and sounds of explosions were heard 10 years before. Burton believed it could be an active volcano, but sent a note to the Anglo-Brazilian Times newspaper recommending an investigation by experts. Burton called the Ribeira Valley the Derbyshire of Brazil because he found similarity between the rocks, despite the fact that he had no notice of the existence of fossils in the Brazilian rocks. Indeed, both areas are rich in carbonates, but the Ribeira Valley is formed by Precambrian and not Carboniferous rocks. Burton predicted that the development of the region would occur as a result of the exploitation of mineral wealth. In the same year, Burton requested permission for mining at Iporanga, in partnerships with his friend, the engineer Augusto Teixeira Coimbra, who also lived in Santos at the time. The authorization was granted in September and renewed in 1869, but Burton left Brazil that year without exploring Iporanga. The Ribeira Valley did not become the Brazilian Derbyshire, as predicted by Burton. The mining of Morro do Chumbo started only in 1920. Always producing on a small scale, the mine suspended its activities in 1992. More than 60 small companies have opened and closed in the valley since Burton's visits, and all have failed. Burton returned to Santos by land on January 19, following an abominable patch where he had to change his means of transport 10 times, on foot, cattle, and wagon. Not even in Central Africa, Burton said, had he suffered such following a trail. During the trip, he spent a cruel night at Piaçabuçu, where the atmosphere was composed by oxygen, nitrogen, and mosquitoes. Following the river downstream from Piaçabuçu, they reached the beautiful São Vicente village after suffering the evils of the season, but enchanted by the nature and by the hospitality of the inhabitants. If a traveler follows the steps of Burton Ribeira Valley nowadays, he'll find a landscape very similar to the one he saw. The village didn't grow, and the valley turned into an area of environment preservation, with the biggest continuous Atlantic forest of Brazil. Its ecosystem contains beaches, forests, mangroves, sandbanks, rupestre paintings, and dozens of limestone caves. The valley is still home of quilombolas and Guaranis, communities not mentioned by Burton in his articles, probably because the purpose of his excursions was economical. Cananea colony disappeared and only ruins remain. Today, ecological tourism is the main economic activity in the valley. Burton's second trip in the province of São Paulo was to the Paraíba Valley and it lasted 10 days. Burton traveled accompanied by two Englishmen, John James Albertin and Daniel Maxim Fox. Albertin was superintendent of the São Paulo Railway and future translator of the poem Lusíadas by Luís de Camões, and Fox was the engineer responsible for the construction of the railway. They left São Paulo city by themselves and passed through Itaquaquecetuba, a very small town for such a big name, said Burton, and after 8 hours in an abominable road, where the holes of the bridge were bigger than the bridge, they arrived in Mogi das Cruzes, where everyone looked at us to see if you had brought a railway. They slept in a roadside market where everyone was removing ticks. On the next day, the group crossed the Tietê Valley and the mountains leading to the Paraíba Valley on a road even worse than the abominable road. They reached Jacareí at the entrance of the valley in the middle of Carnival and were hosted by Dr. Joaquim Floriano de Godoy, future president of the province of Minas Gerais and senator of the empire. They were also welcomed by the Portuguese João da Costa Gomes Leitão, one of the investors of the São Paulo-Rio Railway. Leitão was a rich landowner who had started life in Brazil as tropeiro. His manor, where Burton also stayed, was listed in 1978 and today is the Museum of Anthropology of the Paraíba Valley. They left Jacareí on February 13, and after 2.5 hours, they arrived in São José dos Campos, an old camp of the Indians and today destined to be a rich city. Burton was right. Today, São José dos Campos has almost 1 million inhabitants and more than 700 industries, including an airplane factory. The passage through São José was quick, and they proceeded to Caçapava, through an excellent road with beautiful views. The village of Caçapava had only one street, and the region was described by Burton as possessing one of the most varied and beautiful views of Brazil. They were hosted by Captain João Lopes Moreira, one of the founders of the city. It was still carnival, and they had some beer. The next day, Ash Wednesday, they headed to Taubaté, admiring the beautiful Mantiqueira and Bocaina mountain ridges, situated on both sides of the valley. During the journey, the Mantiqueira always changed its appearance, and its beautiful increases, wrote Burton. Burton's words demonstrate that, despite the exuberant vegetation of the Atlantic forest of the Ribeira Valley, he liked better the landscape of the Paraíba Valley. Although he praises the beauty of the rainforest, he refers to it as melancholic, motley blooms, preferring the open fields of the Paraíba. Em Taubaté, they met Antônio Moreira de Barros and Francisco Gomide. Barros belonged to an important family of farmers and he would become president of the province of Alagoas. On the same day, he presented Burton with a map of the province of São Paulo to help him in his trips. The date, Barros' dedication, and various Burton's handwritten notes can be seen on the map, today in the Huntington Library, California. The second character, the politician Francisco Gomide, died tragically in 1906. He committed suicide after killing his 22-year-old daughter. She would marry the poet Manuel Batista Cepellos in 2 weeks. Gomide had financed the education of the young man and introduced him to his daughter. Before killing himself, he revealed that they were siblings. With Gomide and Barros, the trio visited the German-English Edmundo Morwood, director and founder of São João Evangelista College in Taubaté. Morwood, who is regarded as the introducer of sugarcane in South Africa, has informed Burton about the existence of coal in the valley. The deposit was in the lands of Araújo Vieira, who had welcomed Burton in Caçapava. Burton took samples of coal, iron, and limestone, and sent them to the Anglo-Brazilian news magazines, which reported the discovery. The mine started to be explored only in 1883. Burton's report of the mine and his belief in the extent of oil influenced Monteiro Lobato, a famous children's book writer, in his to-be-born defense of oil prospecting in Brazil. Monteiro Lobato was born in Taubaté in 1882 and studied at the same São João Evangelista College. Today, the name of Edmundo Morwood designates a street and a neighborhood in Taubaté. From Taubaté, the trio went to Pindamonhangaba, a Lilliputian city of gigantic name, said Burton, passing through Tremembé, where Burton located another coal deposit. According to Burton, Tremembé was a place at the time inhabited only once a year during the feast of the Good Jesus. And the city still holds in the present day this traditional religious party. They returned to São Paulo by a different path, passing through the village of Santa Isabel, where they slept at Father Antônio Pereira Bicudo's house. According to Burton, São Paulo was the city that most reminded him of his homeland, and as a geographer, he was sure that the province would have a great future with cotton and railways. Today, São Paulo is the richest state in the country, and São Paulo City has more than 12 million inhabitants. In the following months, Burton made incursions into the west and along the coast of São Paulo, passing by the village of Caraguatatuba, where I grew up. These trips are, however, subject for another day. In closing, I would like to emphasize that the Ribeira and Paraíba valleys evolved in very different ways. The first still presents an aspect very similar to that experienced by Burton. The paths traveled by him remain high trails, and the mountain ranges are still covered by dense forest. The Paraíba Valley, in turn, is an industrial hub with millions of inhabitants. Although some of the old village remains as small towns, and farmhouses from the coffee period are still preserved. These different places deserve to be visited, as well as Minas Gerais, also visited by Burton. And I hope the member of this conference come one day to visit Brazil and follow Burton's steps. Thank you very much for your attention. Bye.